Our guest is here. We are now talking to founder of Who's Got Next, NBA G League newsletter, Keith Schlosser. What's going on, Keith?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
We are good, man. It looks like, Tyler.
Don't do it.
What? Tyler?
Don't do it.
What?
What?
What was I going to say?
I don't know. That's what I'm afraid of. That's why I said don't do it.
Well, I'm not going to attack it right yet.
We know you won't.
No, but by the way, why don't we get some? First of all, how was your New Year?
Asking me.
Yes, how was your New Year?
It was good. Trying to stay happy, healthy, just like the rest of us. So, just
It
trying
shouldn't
to
be
keep
that
your
bad.
head
It's only
above
been
water.
5 days.
What's that?
He says it's only been 5 days.
It's only been 5 days.
I just told you it's been 5 days, and I've had 5 of the worst days of my complete life. So the beginning.
You got COVID again?
No, it has nothing to do with COVID. Nothing to do with COVID. A lot worse than that. But why don't we get into our special guest? This is not about me. As
You
we
make
move
it all
on.
about you.
No, I do not. First of all, anyway.
Wait for it.
Keith, why don't you tell us a little bit about obviously what you do. You write, and you're the founder of the Who's Got Next. Tell us a little bit about how this came along and what made you start writing.
Yeah, sounds good. So I've been writing for a long time, NBA, basketball, G League, Knicks, all sorts of things. Been with companies like Sportsnet New York, Bleacher Report, Vox Media. I was writing about the NBA G League with SB Nation, Vox Media for a little bit, and then I kind of went to the NBA, was a digital media content creator there. Got a great passion for the G League. Those guys are grinding the hell out of it. I mean, we're seeing it now, all those guys getting called up. And, now that I'm venturing off into some different things, keeping the passion going with the G League newsletter there.
So my producer tells me you have a lot of good connections with the New York Knicks. Okay, so let's get into this not competitive New York Knicks team that we thought was going to be competitive this year, being that they were a top 5 defensive ranked team last year. We had Julius Randle, who I think is so very overrated, by the way, the bricklayer himself or the airball wannabe. But he has COVID right now. R.J.
Came
Barrett
back and dominated last night.
R.J. Barrett did not look good when Julius Randle was not in the lineup, and really we've completely disappeared for what we thought he was going to be this year. And Leonard Fournette, we don't know what Kemba we're going to have in the game. And by the way, why aren't they playing the young players like Quigley Moore and Obi Toppin? I don't understand what Tom Thibodeau is doing. So what is your thoughts to this year in 2021, 2022 of the New York boring Knicks?
Yeah, well, you touched on a lot of issues there, and they're all true. I think at this point, the Knicks have a bit of an identity crisis, right? You touched on it, that coming in from last year, they were a 4 seed. You would think that they were going to build upon that. They brought in Kemba Walker. The hometown kid came home. He was set for a redemption season. Fournier, I'm not the biggest Fournier fan, but he's a good player. He's had some success, and they built upon what they were going to be doing last year. And you thought that they were going to make a run for a deeper playoff run, and everything's gone wrong. And it's not just COVID. The health and safety protocol, as you mentioned, Randall had been out. It's not just that. It's players aren't fitting well together. They're not meshing well. That defensive intensity is not there. And that leads to an identity crisis because you sit there and you go, do we want to continue to compete and kind of just, grasp for straws here? Or do we want to start that youth movement with a guy like Quickly, like you mentioned, with Grimes, with Deuce McBride, all these young guys that show promise? Are you willing to kind of build the young guys like Knicks fans have become so accustomed to over the years?
So Kemba Walker now has been the subject of some trade rumors recently with his struggles. He had a couple of big games last week, and Tom Thibodeau started to start him again. But still, his status as a Knick still hasn't been great as a whole. So what would you do if you were the Knicks in this situation? And what do you think a potential trade market could look like for somebody like Kemba? I'm
not so keen on trading him because of the narrative, because he's the hometown kid, because I think they're not at that point where they want to sell the farm yet, right? The trade deadline's coming up, full force, very fast here. We only have a few weeks left. But I think the Knicks are still in that mode. Thibodeau wants to win. I think that, Kemba kind of showed him. He kind of shoved it up his butt a little bit that, hey, I can still play and I can contribute. He was player of the week, had a triple-double, had a 40-point game, 40-plus point game. So I think Kemba's showing, hey, I have a little bit more left in the tank, obviously, and he wants to make a go at it, and he's kind of making the Knicks rethink things a little bit.
Tyler?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I thought there was more to that.
Lost?
No, I was actually watching the other New York
Happy
team.
New Year, Tyler. Where the hell are you?
Well, I was waiting for my hair to grow back. But anyway.
That's never going to happen.
I know. I understand. But anyway.
Rogaine for men.
Are you done? Are you done now? McFly? Sorry, sir. He's very animated
His name
tonight.
is Keith.
What?
His name is Keith.
I understand, but maybe he doesn't want me to call him Keith. Anyway, Keith, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Mr. Schlosser.
Mr. Schlosser. So, Keith, with that being said, obviously the trade rumors around the Knicks all year long have been just dramatic. There was a Ben Simmons rumor for a few weeks. Damian Lillard's name never really seems to go away, right? One day he's staying, the next day he's gone, the next day he's staying. Do you think the Knicks are still going after another megastar to make Julius Randle a Robin, or do you think that the Knicks are just going to go status quo on this rotational piece of don't even answer? See, you're going to make it about you again. Example A right now.
Julius Randle's not a Robin. He's like the Penguin, okay?
Oh, boy. Oh, goodness. Anyway, Keith, go ahead, please.
I think it's a blessing or a curse to be in the New York market, right? Because if you're competing, if you're going for that playoff spot or even championship hopes, whatever, you're always going to have that appeal to the big stars like a Simmons, like a Lillard to kind of come in. That everyone loves. I'm just thinking about Twitter the other day. Kyle Kuzma is not the star that the Knicks want, clearly. But even him, he was saying, the MSG is my favorite place to be. It draws players in. So I think there's always going to be that appeal. At this point, I don't really think that the Knicks are going to make that big move because I think they're a little trigger shy. I think that they had this great year last year. They had all the pieces in place. They got Kemba. They got Fournier. They shelled out all this money. And to your point earlier, what's the trade market like for Kemba Walker? I don't think it's anything. I think that Kemba had a great week. He was player of the week last week. But as far as the market goes, I think, people are still looking at him like he's had, some time off or some poor games or whatever. Fournier has been probably the Knicks' worst acquisition. So that all leads to them not having the trade pieces to put together a package for a Ben Simmons or a Lillard. And the young guys that they have, they don't want to trade away yet. Those guys show promise, especially if you're going to make that transition. Those are the guys that you're going to have to build up for. So I think the Knicks are at a point where they're going to stick it out with who they have, for better or for worse. And, it's going to be a shame if everything from last season just kind of comes faltering down and you have to build back up again. But I think this is where they're at.
We are talking to founder of the Who's Got Next NBA G League newsletter, Keith Schlosser. Now, Keith, there's not many questions I have for you besides these. I mean, we talked about the Knicks. Let's get off the Knicks. Why don't we talk about the full league? Is there any surprises this year that really has stood out to you? Obviously, the Kyrie Irving return. Is it a surprise to me? No. Is he going to get his shots? Probably not. Is it going to affect the Brooklyn Nets moving forward in the playoffs? Yes, it will. But what are your thoughts with the Lakers, the Chicago Bulls? DeRozan completely changed that organization with LaVine, arguably the best 1-2 punch in the NBA right now. Is there any surprise that besides the stuff that I just mentioned to you that's really stood out to you, that surprised you and surprised a lot of the analysts and writers this year with the league and the way it's going?
I'll just touch on the Bulls for a quick second. I know you said to try something different, but it's really interesting. We're talking about the Knicks. We're talking about the Bulls. The Knicks had a kind of a choice between Fournier and DeRozan. Right, and they were going to have to give more money to DeRozan for a shorter period of time, and they didn't want to make that commitment. But look how much he's changed that Bulls organization. They're not just a playoff contender; they have a real chance at a championship. And DeRozan has totally shifted that culture. And people say he's a most improved candidate. I think he's an MVP candidate, and it just goes to show you how if the Knicks kind of went in another direction, how far ahead they'd be right now. So that's my take there. But as far as my surprise this year, ironically enough, specifically because you didn't mention it, right? I think the Warriors are a big surprise this year. It's really interesting. You can't count a team with Stephen Curry out, but the fact that they didn't have Clay. Draymond took a big step back last year. He didn't look like he had the energy. He had COVID last year. I mean, he just came back another COVID bit now. But I think the fact that the Warriors are looking like a championship contender and they're all retooled, they have all these young guys, I think the fact that Clay is about to come back is just going to bolster them into the perennial atmosphere that people are used to, and that's a big surprise coming in from last year.